Turns out, fasting and teen athletes. Your teenage son skips breakfast and lunch for 3 days straight. He's not punishing himself. He's not on a diet. He's observing a religious practice that millions of Muslims do every year. And new research just found something deeply unsettling happening inside his brain while he does it. His reaction time is slower. His attention span is collapsing. His sleep is worse. And nobody really knew any of this was happening until now. So the question becomes, how many athletes around the world are pushing their bodies through these exact changes without realizing what's actually going on? Let's start with what we thought we knew. For decades, sports scientists have obsessed over how food affects performance. Carbs before a game, protein after a workout, hydration windows. We've optimized everything we can measure. But here's what we almost never studied. What happens to your brain and body when you voluntarily fast during daylight hours for 3 days straight, especially if you're a teenager whose body is still building itself? Most research on intermittent fasting focuses on weight loss or metabolic health in adults. Nobody was really asking about young athletes. Nobody was looking at what 3 consecutive days actually does to cognition, reaction time, and sleep. Until now. This is where Hamdi Baati and his team at the University of Sfax in Tunisia entered the picture. They weren't working in isolation either. This was a genuine international collaboration. Researchers from Turkey, France, Romania, and Jordan all contributed. The paper landed in the journal Nutrients in July of 2026. And what they decided to study was deceptively simple, but completely unexamined. What happens to adolescent soccer players when they fast from dawn to sunset for 3 consecutive days? Here's what they actually did. They recruited teenage male soccer players, not random teenagers, athletes. Players who trained regularly, understood their bodies, pushed themselves hard. Then they split them into 2 groups. One group fasted for 3 consecutive days during their normal waking hours. Dawn to sunset. Complete abstinence from food and water. The other group ate normally. The researchers then measured 3 specific things. First, cognitive function, memory and attention tasks. Second, psychomotor vigilance. That's your reaction time under pressure, your ability to stay sharp when something demands immediate response. Third, they tracked sleep quality using subjective reports and likely some objective measures. They basically created a controlled window where they could watch what 3 days of fasting actually does to a young athlete's brain. Think of it like this. Imagine you're running a software system and you suddenly cut the power supply by 40% for 3 days. You don't shut it down entirely, you just reduce what's feeding it. You want to know, does it slow down? Does it make errors? Does it struggle to restart properly at night? That's essentially what this study was doing to adolescent brains. The results came back and they were pretty clear. The fasting group showed measurable decline in cognitive performance. We're not talking about dramatic collapse. We're talking about real, quantifiable drops in the kinds of tasks that matter for athletes. Memory performance declined. Attention span got noticeably worse. But here's where it gets interesting. The psychomotor vigilance results were the sharpest. Reaction times slowed. Precision dropped. For a soccer player, that translates directly. A midfielder can't anticipate a pass as quickly. A defender's response to a sudden shift in play gets sluggish. A goalkeeper's reflexes dull just enough to matter. These aren't philosophical changes. These are measurable milliseconds that determine whether you're sharp or slow. The sleep quality findings were equally striking. The fasting group reported worse sleep. Not just feeling tired the next morning, actual sleep disruption. Their nights were less restorative. Now, here's the honest part. This study was 3 days long. 3 consecutive days. We don't know what happens on day 5 or day 30. We don't know if the body adapts. We don't know if performance bounces back faster than expected or takes longer to recover. And the study was conducted on male soccer players specifically. We can't automatically assume the same effects hit female athletes or non-athletes the same way. But within those parameters, the signal was clean. Let's connect this to actual life. Millions of Muslim athletes around the world observe Ramadan. That's a month of dawn to sunset fasting. This study looked at just 3 consecutive days. Think about what that scales toward. If 3 days produces measurable cognitive decline and reaction time slowdown, what does 30 days do? What happens to a professional soccer player performing at the highest level? What about a student athlete trying to balance practice, matches, and studying for exams? The findings suggest that nobody should just assume they can fast at this intensity without acknowledging real neurological and athletic costs. The skepticism here is fair. This was a quasi-experimental study, which means it wasn't perfectly randomized. The sample size was limited. The measurements were relatively short-term. These are real limitations. You can't take a 3-day study and extrapolate it into permanent conclusions about a month-long practice. But that's exactly why this research matters. It's a starting point for questions nobody else was asking. Here's what this actually challenges. For years, we've treated religious fasting and athletic performance as separate conversations. Athletes fast for religious reasons. Scientists study athletic performance. These two worlds rarely intersect in the research literature. This study is saying they should. The bigger question underneath is whether we've been overlooking the neurocognitive costs of practices that billions of people engage in regularly. We optimize everything for athletes. We study every macronutrient ratio. We analyze sleep cycles down to REM stages. But when it comes to voluntary religious practices that affect millions of young athletes, we've been silent. That silence is ending. Here's what might genuinely blow your mind. We still don't fully understand how these 3 days of fasting affect athletic recovery afterward. Do athletes bounce back fully in a day, a week? Do they perform at reduced capacity for days afterward without realizing it? Those answers matter enormously, and they haven't been studied yet. This research reveals something fundamental. We think we understand what athletes need to perform, but we've ignored massive swaths of real-world behavior that affects millions of young people. The intersection of biology, culture, religion, and athletic performance is vastly more complex than we've been treating it. And these researchers just proved it matters more than we thought. Turns out, scientists have been busy, and they're not done yet.